Imagine biting into a vegetable that tastes like oysters or a fruit you have to let rot before it's edible. Sounds insane, right? But for medieval farmers, these weren't weird experiments, they were survival food. Today we're digging up 9 forgotten vegetables from the Middle Ages that deserve a comeback. Trust me, you'll never look at your grocery store the same way again. Let's kick things off with purslane, the so-called weed that's actually a superfood. Medieval peasants loved it because it grew everywhere without effort. Packed with omega-3 seconds, iron, and vitamin C, this plant was free nutrition when fields failed. Think of it as the medieval version of kale, except no one had to pay $10 a bunch. Next up, straight from the salty coast samphire, or sea asparagus. Imagine biting into a crunchy, salty, lemony stalk in the middle of winter. Medieval fishing villages used it fresh and pickled to fight off scurvy. Today, chefs call it a delicacy. Back then, it was just Tuesday's dinner. Now, have you heard of rampion? You might know the name from the fairy tale Rapunzel, but yes, it was a real vegetable. Its nutty roots and tender leaves were a double win. Root for storage, leaves for fresh eating. Medieval cooks adored it. And spoiler, one rampion feast may have inspired one of the most famous fairy tales ever told. From fairy tales to swamps meet fool's watercress. Don't let the name fool you. This watery green popped up along streams and ponds, and people tossed the tender shoots into soups and stews. It was poor man's salad, but packed with vitamins when nothing else would grow. Sometimes survival comes from the humblest weeds. And now let's talk about a vegetable hiding in plain sight. Turnip greens. Everyone remembers the root. But in the Middle Ages, the leaves were the real prize. Richer in calcium, vitamin A, and protein than the bulb itself, they kept peasants alive through long winters. Imagine eating a hearty stew where the greens matter more than the root that was everyday life. Ready for something stranger? Meet the medlar, a fruit that had to rot before it was edible. Fresh, it's hard and bitter, but after weeks of bletting, it turns into soft, sweet, cinnamon-like applesauce. Medieval people loved it so much they made pies, jellies, even wine. Imagine dessert made from controlled decay, that's commitment. Now here's a showstopper. Salsify, the oyster vegetable. Cook it right, and it genuinely tastes like seafood. Monks grew it as a fish substitute during Lent, when eating meat or fish was forbidden. White and black salsify both survived. Freezing winters in the ground. Dig up dinner whenever you needed it. Practical, strange, and a little magical. But flavour wasn't the only power in medieval gardens. Meet lovage, a herb so intense that a single sprig could season a whole pot of stew. It's like celery on steroids. Monks brewed it for stomach problems, cooks candied the stems, and even the roots ended up on the plate. A plant that lived for decades, cured ailments, and flavoured everything. Why on earth did we forget it? And while lovage was bold, chickweed was humble but no less important. This tiny green popped up everywhere, unstoppable. And medieval families gratefully gathered it. Rich in vitamin C 7 times more than oranges, it kept scurvy at bay in the cold months. For peasants, chickweed was proof that even weeds could be lifesavers. From weeds to waves, time for sea kale. It thrived in salty, sandy beaches where little else could grow. In spring, its shoots were blanched and eaten like asparagus, while in summer the leaves were cooked like cabbage. Packed with vitamin C, it saved coastal folks from scurvy long before sailors had limes. Free, resilient, and delicious, yet forgotten. But here's one with a double life. Woad. Famous for its brilliant blue dye, used on clothes and even warriors, but in its youth, the tender green leaves were edible. Tossed into spring salads, they added a peppery kick. Later, the same plant stank up towns with dye vats so foul that kings banned processing near castles. Beauty, food, and stink all in one. Think we're done? Not yet. Let's circle back to our new discoveries because medieval farmers knew more than we give them credit for. Some plants weren't just food. They were legends. Remember rampion from earlier? That little root might be the reason the story of Rapunzel even exists. That's food history hiding in plain sight. Now imagine a weed that modern chefs would pay big money for. That's purslane, our omega-3 powerhouse. Back then it grew like a gift from nature, free for anyone to pick. Today it shows up in Michelin star restaurants as a garnish. Peasants ate it to survive. Nobles might have sneered. But maybe they were just ahead of their time. And don't forget samphire, clinging to cliffs and kissed by the sea. Shakespeare even wrote about men risking their lives to harvest it. Imagine a green so valuable it made it into poetry. In medieval kitchens it was humble, crunchy and salty, a free vitamin pill from the waves. So why did all these plants vanish? Sometimes it was marketing bad names like scorzonera didn't help. Sometimes it was convenience, potatoes and onions were easier. And sometimes we just forgot. But what if the next food trend isn't avocado toast or kale smoothies? What if it's medieval superfoods making a comeback? From sea kale to medlars, chickweed to lovage, these 9 forgotten foods tell a story. Survival, creativity, and flavors lost to time. They weren't just old vegetables. They were lifelines, medicines, and even myths. Maybe it's time to rediscover them. So would you dare to try a vegetable that tastes like oysters, or a fruit that has to rot first? Let us know.